I love these nights with you.
Me too. It's our special place.
It really is.
Cheers to us.
You want the loan under my name?
Yes. But since I'm the one managing construction, it might be easier if the property is under my name.
Our children will grow up here. I love how peaceful it is here with you.
Me too. It's perfect.
Come here.
Everyone, please continue enjoying the celebration. Nosi, let's just end this peacefully.
End what?
This relationship.
You're ending our relationship on your wedding day?
I can't believe this is all on me. Okay, one thing at a time.
Do you have proof?
Bank statements.
And do you have messages or evidence showing that the house was intended for both of you?
Matthew sent many messages during construction, saying it was our home.
That's good.
What is it, legal action?
That woman is insane. She's trying to claim the house.
But she paid the loan.
So what?
She might win.
Mr. Matthew must either repay Dr. Nosi the full value of the loan payments she has made, or the property will be placed under judicial sale.
What does that mean?
If the defendant fails to repay the amount within 90 days, the house will be sold and the proceeds used to settle the loan and compensate Dr. Nosi.
Based on the evidence presented, the court finds that Dr. Nosi has been unfairly burdened financially while the defendant benefited from the property. Court adjourned.
This is all your fault.
My fault?
My fault? Oh. You're the one who said she wouldn't fight.
Nosi was a successful doctor who believed she had found the love of her life. Matthew told her they were building a future together, a beautiful home where they would raise their children. She trusted him with everything, her heart, her money, even the home loan that built the house. But the day the house was finished, Nosi drove there to surprise him. Instead, she found Matthew standing in a suit, next to a woman in a white wedding dress. Inside the house she had paid for. And in that moment, Nosi realized something terrifying. She wasn't just heartbroken. She was paying for the house where another woman would sleep beside her man. But what Matthew didn't know was that Nosi wasn't the type of woman who stayed broken forever. The first time Nosi met Matthew, she was still wearing her white hospital coat. It had been a long day at the provincial hospital in Durban. The emergency ward had been overflowing since morning. 2 accident victims, a child with severe asthma and a woman in labor who arrived too late to be transferred to maternity. By the time Nosi stepped outside the hospital gates, the sun was already sinking behind the buildings. Her feet ached, her head throbbed. All she wanted was to go home, take a hot shower, and sleep. She walked toward the taxi rank across the road when she noticed a small crowd gathered around a car with its bonnet open. A tall man stood beside it, scratching the back of his head. He looked frustrated, but when he turned his head, their eyes met. He smiled, not the kind of smile men used when they wanted something. It was warm, natural. "Doctor," he said jokingly as she passed by, pointing at her coat. "You don't fix cars too, do you?" Nosi laughed softly. "No, unfortunately not." "Well," he sighed dramatically, "then I guess I'm finished. This thing decided to die today." She glanced at the car. "Battery problem?" His eyes widened. "You know cars?" "My father was a mechanic before he passed away," she replied. "Open the terminal." He quickly did. She leaned slightly over the engine, tightening a loose connection. "Try again." Matthew turned the key. The engine roared back to life. He stared at her like she had performed a miracle. "Doctor and mechanic," he said. "That's dangerous." She shrugged. "Just basic things." He stepped closer and extended his hand. "My name is Matthew." "Nosi." He held her hand for a second longer than necessary. "Thank you, Nosi." She nodded and started walking toward the taxi rank again, but his voice stopped her. "Can I at least buy you coffee to say thank you?" She hesitated. Nosi had always been careful with men. Medical school had been her entire life for years. Relationships were something she had watched from a distance. But there was something about Matthew. Something honest. "Coffee," she said slowly. Not dinner. Matthew grinned. Coffee it is. That coffee turned into long conversations. Those conversations turned into dinners. Dinners became late-night phone calls that lasted until morning. Matthew was unlike the men Nosi had known. He wasn't intimidated by her education. He wasn't insecure about her career. Instead, he admired it. "You save lives," he would say proudly. "And you?" she would ask. He would laugh. "I survive." Matthew was what many people called a hustler. He sold anything that could make money. Some weeks he dealt with used cars. Other weeks he supplied building materials to small contractors. Sometimes he would disappear for 3 days, chasing a business deal in another province. But he always came back. And when he did, he made Nosi feel like the most important person in the world. He cooked for her. He waited for her after long hospital shifts. He even drove her to work sometimes at 5 in the morning. Nosi's friends warned her. "Be careful with men who don't have stable jobs," her colleague Dr. Thandi said. But Nosi always defended him. "Matthew works harder than anyone I know." And it was true. Matthew was always chasing something, always planning, always dreaming. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of her apartment, Matthew looked unusually serious. "I want something real," he said quietly. Nosi turned to him. "What do you mean?" "A home," he said. "Not renting, not moving around. Something permanent," she smiled. "You're thinking about the future. I'm thinking about us." Her heart skipped. "Us?" He nodded. "I don't want to date you forever, Nosi." Silence fell between them. Then he took her hand. "I want to marry you one day." Her chest filled with warmth. No man had ever spoken to her like that. 3 months later, Matthew arrived at her apartment with excitement written all over his face. "Get dressed," he said. "Where are we going?" "You'll see." He drove nearly an hour outside the city. They eventually stopped in a developing residential area. Empty plots stretched across the hills. Matthew jumped out of the car. "Come." They walked on to one of the stands. Nosi looked around. "Matthew, what are we doing here?" He turned toward her with a proud smile. "I bought this stand." Her eyes widened. "You bought land?" He nodded. "For our house." Her heart began racing. "Our house?" "Yes." He grabbed her hands. "Nosi, I want us to build something together, something no one can take away." She felt tears forming in her eyes. "But Matthew, land is expensive." "I got a good deal," he said proudly. He pulled out documents from a folder. Then he said something that surprised her. "I registered the stand in your name." Nosi blinked. "In my name?" "Yes." "Why?" Matthew shrugged. "You're the one with the stable career." She stared at him. "You trust me with something like this?" "I trust you with my life." That sentence melted her completely. Over the next weeks, Matthew spoke constantly about building a house. Not a small one. A beautiful modern home. 3 bedrooms. A big kitchen. A yard for children. One evening, he brought up something important. "There's one problem." "What is it?" "I can't qualify for a home loan." Nosi frowned. "Why not?" "My income is not stable enough," he admitted. He looked down. "But you can." She remained silent. "Nosi," he continued softly, "if you take the home loan, we can build the house faster." She stared at him. "You want the loan under my name?" "Yes." "But it will be a big financial responsibility." Matthew nodded quickly. "I know, and I promise I will help pay it." He took both her hands. "This house will be ours." His voice was filled with certainty. Nosi's heart was already committed to him. "I trust you," she whispered. Matthew smiled with relief. The bank approved the loan 2 months later. It was one of the happiest days of their relationship. Matthew lifted her into the air in the bank parking lot. We're building our home, he shouted. Nosi laughed. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was building a future with someone. Construction began quickly. Matthew handled everything: builders, materials, supervision. He spent almost every day at the construction site. Sometimes he would send Nosi pictures. Look at our kitchen. Our bedroom walls are up. Our balcony view. Each message filled her heart with pride. This was their dream. But one evening, Matthew raised another request. They were sitting in her apartment when he spoke carefully. There's something I need to ask you. Nosi looked at him. What is it? He hesitated. The stand is still under your name. Yes, but since I'm the one managing construction, it might be easier if the property is under my name. She frowned slightly. What do you mean? For permits, contractors, paperwork, he explained quickly. It would just make things simpler. Nosi thought for a moment. Are you sure it's necessary? Matthew nodded confidently. Completely. Then he looked into her eyes. Nosi, do you trust me? The question hurt. Of course she trusted him. She loved him. Yes, she said softly. And with that simple word, Nosi unknowingly signed away the very house she was paying for. Construction continued for almost a year. The house slowly transformed into something beautiful. Large windows, a modern kitchen, a wide balcony overlooking the hills. Matthew seemed happier than ever. Sometimes he would hug Nosi and whisper, Our children will grow up here. And every time he said it, Nosi believed him. She had no idea that somewhere beyond her perfect dream, Matthew was already planning a future with another woman, and her name was Nels. For almost a year, Nosi believed she was living inside the most beautiful chapter of her life. The house was rising slowly from the red soil of the hill outside the city, brick by brick, window by window. Every time Matthew sent her photos from the construction site, her heart filled with pride. Sometimes the pictures showed only walls, or sometimes they showed piles of cement and sand. But in Nosi's mind, she could already see the finished home. Their home. A place where laughter would echo through the hallways. A place where their children would run across the yard. A place where she and Matthew would grow old together. Every month, when the bank deducted the home loan from her account, she didn't complain. Instead, she smiled. This is for our future, she would tell herself. And Matthew always reassured her. Oh, soon we'll move in, he would say. Then everything will feel worth it. At first, everything truly did feel perfect. But slowly, almost too slowly to notice, things began to change. It started with small things. Matthew began spending more time at the construction site. At least, that's what he said. Before, he used to come to Nosi's apartment almost every evening. They would cook together, watch movies, or simply sit on the balcony talking about life. Now, he often called to say he was too tired. Construction is stressful, he explained. Builders are difficult people. Nosi understood. She was a doctor. She knew how exhausting work could be. Still, sometimes when she lay in bed alone at night, she missed him. One evening she called him around 9. He didn't answer. She tried again. Still nothing. He only returned the call after midnight. Sorry, he said quickly. I was with the contractors. You sound tired, she replied softly. I am. Are you at home? Yes. But something about his voice felt distant, cold. Nosi ignored the feeling. Trust was important in relationships, and she trusted Matthew. Months passed. The house was almost finished. Matthew insisted on handling most of the final details himself. I want everything perfect, he told her. One Saturday morning, he finally said the words she had been waiting to hear. The house is ready. Nosi's heart nearly jumped out of her chest. Ready? She repeated excitedly. Yes. Can I see it? Matthew hesitated for a moment. Not yet. She frowned. Why not? I'm planning something special, he said. What kind of surprise would it be if you see it before the right moment? She laughed. You're acting mysterious. Just trust me, he replied. And again she did. One afternoon at the hospital, Nosi was finishing paperwork when her phone rang. It was Matthew. I need to ask you something, he said. Of course. There's a woman helping with the interior decoration of the house. Oh? She said with interest. Yes, she has good taste. She knows about modern furniture. What's her name? There was a short pause. Nels. The name meant nothing to Nosi. Is she an interior designer? Something like that, Nosi smiled. Well, if she's helping make the house beautiful, then I'm grateful. Matthew sounded relieved. She's doing a great job. Nosi imagined a middle-aged woman arranging furniture and curtains. She had no idea that Nels was only 24 years old, young, beautiful, and very interested in Matthew. The first crack in Nosi's perfect dream came unexpectedly. It was a Friday afternoon. She had finished her hospital shift earlier than usual and decided to surprise Matthew at the construction site. She stopped at a small restaurant and bought takeout for both of them. Matthew loved grilled chicken and pap. When she arrived near the house, she noticed something strange. A car was parked outside, a white sedan she had never seen before. She walked slowly toward the house. Laughter floated out from inside. A woman's laughter. Nosi hesitated. Maybe it was the decorator. Still holding the food containers, she stepped inside. The house looked beautiful. White walls, shiny floors, large windows that filled the rooms with sunlight. But that wasn't what caught her attention. Matthew was standing in the living room, and next to him stood a young woman. A very beautiful young woman, slim, long braided hair, wearing a fitted dress. They were standing very close together, too close. For a moment, none of them spoke. Matthew looked shocked. Nosi, he said quickly. She forced a smile. I thought I'd surprise you. The woman beside him stepped back slightly. Matthew cleared his throat. Nosi, this is Nels. Nosi looked at her carefully. This was the interior decorator. She seemed too young for that role. Nels smiled politely. Nice to meet you. You too, Nosi replied. But something inside her stomach twisted. Matthew quickly took the food from her hands. You didn't have to bring lunch, he said. I thought you might be hungry. We just ate, he replied. Just ate. Nosi nodded slowly. Of course. For the rest of the visit, Matthew acted strangely. Nervous, so distracted. He barely looked at Nosi. And every time Nels spoke, Matthew seemed unusually attentive. When Nosi left that afternoon, a quiet uneasiness settled inside her heart, but she still pushed it away. Matthew loved her. He wanted to marry her. He had said so many times. After that day, Matthew visited her even less. Sometimes days passed without seeing him. When she asked why, his answer was always the same. The house needs attention. But something didn't feel right anymore. One night, Nosi tried calling him again. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. Her mind began to wander to places she didn't want to imagine. Was he cheating? No. Matthew wasn't that kind of man. At least, that's what she believed. 2 weeks later, Nosi finally decided to visit the house again. This time, she didn't call Matthew beforehand. She wanted to surprise him again. But this time, she was the one who received the shock. As she drove toward the property, she noticed several cars parked outside. Music was playing. People were gathered in the yard. Her confusion grew. Was there a party? She parked the car and stepped out slowly. Voices filled the air, laughter, celebration. Then she heard someone say something that froze her entire body. Congratulations to Matthew and his beautiful bride. Bride. Nosi's heart began pounding. Slowly, she walked toward the house, and when she reached the front yard, her entire world collapsed. Matthew stood in the center of the crowd, wearing a suit, smiling proudly, and standing beside him, in a white wedding dress, was Nels, the same woman from the house, the same woman Matthew had introduced as a decorator. People were cheering, clapping, celebrating, but Nosi heard nothing. Her ears rang, her chest felt tight. Matthew's eyes suddenly met hers across the crowd. The smile disappeared from his face. For a moment, the world stood still. Then Nosi whispered the only word she could manage. Matthew. But he didn't move. He didn't come to her. He didn't explain. He simply stood there, holding another woman's hand, inside the house that Nosi had sacrificed everything to build. For a long moment, Nosi stood frozen at the gate of the house. The music continued playing. People were laughing. Glasses clinked as guests toasted the newly married couple. But Nosi felt like the entire world had suddenly gone silent. Her eyes remained fixed on Matthew. Matthew, the man who once held her hands and promised her a future. Matthew, the man who told her they would raise children in this very house. Matthew, the man she trusted with everything. Now he stood in front of her, wearing a dark suit, smiling beside another woman. And that woman was dressed as a bride. Nels, the same woman he had introduced as an interior decorator. Nosi's chest tightened painfully. Her legs felt weak, but somehow she managed to walk forward. Every step felt heavy. The crowd slowly noticed her presence. Some of the guests stopped talking. A few whispered to each other. Who is she? Matthew swallowed nervously. Nels turned and followed his gaze. For the first time, the two women looked directly at each other. Nels's expression was calm, almost confident. Nosi finally stopped a few meters away from them. Her voice trembled when she spoke. Matthew. The name came out like a broken whisper. Matthew glanced at the guests, clearly uncomfortable. Nosi, we should talk somewhere else. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Somewhere else? She looked around the yard. This is my house. A wave of murmurs spread through the crowd. Matthew quickly shook his head. Nosi, please don't do this here. Her heart began beating faster. Don't do what? She asked. Her voice was getting louder now. Don't ask why my boyfriend is marrying another woman in the house I built. The guests fell completely silent. Nels folded her arms calmly. Matthew ran a hand over his face. This isn't the place. But Nosi had already reached her breaking point. Oh, now you care about the place? She cried. When you were lying to me for months, you didn't care about the place. Matthew grabbed her arm gently. Let's go inside. She pulled her arm away. Don't touch me, gasps spread through the crowd, but Nels suddenly stepped forward. Her voice was soft but sharp. You're embarrassing yourself. Nosi slowly turned toward her. Excuse me? Nels tilted her head slightly. This is our wedding. The words hit Nosi like a slap. Our wedding. Nosi's eyes burned with tears. Your wedding, she repeated slowly. Then she pointed at the house behind them. This house was built with my money. Matthew finally spoke again, his voice firm now. That's enough. Nosi turned to him in disbelief. That's enough, she whispered. You lied to me, Matthew. His jaw tightened. I didn't lie. Her eyes widened. You didn't lie? You assumed things, he replied coldly. The sentence felt like a knife twisting in her chest. I assumed things, she repeated. Yes, he said. I never said we were getting married tomorrow. You said we were building our future. Matthew shrugged slightly. Plans change. The cruelty in his voice stunned her. This wasn't the man she knew. Or maybe This was the real Matthew all along. Matthew looked around at the watching guests. Everyone, please continue enjoying the celebration. But no one moved. They were all too curious about the drama unfolding before them. Matthew sighed. Nosi, let's just end this peacefully. End what? She asked. This relationship. The words landed like thunder. Nosi stared at him, I unable to believe what she was hearing. You're ending our relationship on your wedding day. Matthew nodded slightly. Yes. Tears rolled down her cheeks now. And the house? She asked. Matthew's eyes hardened. The house belongs to me. Her breath caught. No. Yes, he said calmly. You transferred the property into my name. Nosi felt the ground beneath her feet disappear. He was right. She had done that, because she trusted him. But I'm paying the loan, she cried. Matthew shrugged again. That's your agreement with the bank. Her knees nearly gave out. You tricked me. I didn't force you, he replied coldly. You signed the papers. Nosi looked at the house again. The beautiful white walls, the large windows, the balcony where she once imagined standing with Matthew watching sunsets. Every brick now felt like a mockery of her love. See, then she turned slowly toward Nels. And you knew? She asked quietly. Nels didn't hesitate. Yes. Nosi's eyes widened. You knew he was with me. Yes, Nels repeated calmly. And you still married him? Nels shrugged slightly. He chose me. The cruelty in her tone was undeniable. Nosi's heart shattered completely. Matthew sighed impatiently. This drama is unnecessary. Unnecessary. That single word burned inside her chest. Unnecessary, she whispered. You ruined my life. Matthew shook his head. You're being dramatic. Then he looked directly into her eyes and said something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. You'll get over it. The sentence broke something deep inside Nosi. She stared at him for several seconds. The man she loved was gone. Or maybe he had never existed. Finally, she spoke again. But the loan, Matthew shrugged. That's your responsibility. Her chest tightened painfully. You expect me to keep paying for the house you live in with your wife? Matthew looked irritated. That's between you and the bank. Then he turned slightly toward the guests. Please escort her out. Two men stepped forward awkwardly, but Nosi raised her hand. Don't touch me. Her voice was suddenly calm. Too calm. She wiped the tears from her face slowly. Then she looked at Matthew one last time. You're right. He frowned slightly. About what? She took a deep breath. So I will get over it. Then she turned and walked away. Every step felt like walking through fire. Behind her, the music slowly started playing again. The celebration continued. Matthew and Nels returned to their guests. And the house that Nosi had sacrificed everything for, now belonged to the two people who destroyed her. 2 weeks later, reality hit harder than heartbreak. Nosi sat at her kitchen table staring at her bank statement. The home loan deduction had gone through again. The amount was enormous, almost half of her monthly salary. She felt sick. She was paying for a house she wasn't allowed to live in, a house where another woman now slept beside the man she loved. Her phone rang. It was the bank. Dr. Nosi, we noticed you may want to review your loan repayment plan. Her voice trembled. Yes, I'm aware. You are responsible for the full loan amount. Responsible. That word echoed painfully in her mind. After the call ended, Nosi finally broke down. She cried harder than she had ever cried in her life. Not just for Matthew, not just for the house, but for the betrayal, for the trust she had given so freely, for the future that had been stolen from her. But somewhere deep beneath the pain, something else was beginning to grow. Not sadness, not grief. Something stronger, something colder. And soon, Matthew and Nels would learn that betraying the wrong woman can be the most expensive mistake of all. For the first few weeks after the wedding, Nosi lived like a shadow of herself. She went to work, she treated patients, she smiled politely at colleagues. But inside, she felt hollow. At night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling of her apartment, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of the city outside. Sleep refused to come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same image. Matthew standing in a suit, Nels in a white wedding dress. Inside the house she had paid for. The betrayal replayed in her mind over and over again, like a cruel movie she couldn't stop watching. But the heartbreak was not even the worst part. The worst part was the bank. Every month, the loan payment swallowed nearly half of her salary. The house that Matthew and Nels were living in comfortably was slowly draining her life. One evening, as she stared at another bank statement, something inside her finally snapped. Her hands stopped trembling, her breathing slowed, and for the first time since that terrible day, Nosi stopped crying. Instead, she started thinking, very carefully, very clearly, and that was the moment everything began to change. 2 days later, Nosi walked into a small law office in the city center. The sign outside read, Maseko and Partners, attorneys at law inside. The receptionist greeted her politely. Good morning. How can we help you? I need to speak to a lawyer about a property issue. Within 20 minutes, she was sitting across from a middle-aged attorney named Mr. Maseko. He listened quietly as Nosi told him the entire story, every detail, the land, the loan, the transfer of ownership, Matthew marrying another woman, and the crushing debt she was still paying. Mr. Masako leaned back in his chair, folding his hands together thoughtfully. Dr. Nosi, he said slowly. Yes? You made a serious mistake. Her stomach dropped. I know. But, he continued calmly, that doesn't necessarily mean you lost everything. Her eyes widened slightly. What do you mean? Mr. Maseko opened a notebook. You took the home loan under your name. Yes. You made all the payments. Yes. Do you have proof? Bank statements, she said immediately. He nodded. And do you have messages or evidence showing that the house was intended for both of you? Nosi thought for a moment. Matthew sent many messages during construction, saying it was our home. Mr. Maseko smiled faintly. That's good. Hope flickered for the first time in months. So, what does it mean? The lawyer leaned forward. It means your case is not as hopeless as you think. Her heart started beating faster. But the house is under Matthew's name, she said. Yes, he agreed. But the financial responsibility for building that house came from you. He paused before continuing. In the eyes of the law, that could be considered unjust enrichment. Nosi frowned slightly. What does that mean? It means someone benefited unfairly from your money. Her breathing quickened. So, I can fight this? Mr. Masako nodded slowly. Yes. Within a week, Matthew received a letter from the law firm. He was sitting in the living room when the courier delivered it. Nels was on the couch scrolling through her phone. Matthew opened the envelope casually, but as he read the document, his face slowly changed. What is it? Nels asked. Matthew didn't answer immediately. He read the letter again, then again. Finally, he threw the papers onto the table. That woman is insane. Nels picked up the document. Her eyes widened as she read. Legal action, she whispered. Matthew paced across the room angrily. She's trying to claim the house. Nels looked nervous now. But she paid the loan. Matthew glared at her. So what? She might win, Nels said quietly. Matthew stopped pacing. For the first time since the wedding, he looked worried. 3 months later, the case reached court. The courtroom was quiet as the judge reviewed the documents. Nosi sat beside her lawyer. Across the room, Matthew sat with his own attorney. Nels sat behind him. For the first time since the wedding day, Matthew and Nosi looked at each other again. But the woman sitting in the courtroom now was not the same broken woman who had walked away from his house. Nosi looked calm, confident, stronger. The judge spoke after reviewing the financial records. Dr. Nosi has paid 100% of the construction loan. Matthew shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The judge continued. The defendant, Mr. Matthew, currently resides in the property without contributing to the loan. Matthew's lawyer tried to argue, but the financial evidence was overwhelming. Bank transfers, loan agreements, messages, construction payments. Everything pointed back to Nosi. Finally, the judge delivered the decision. Based on the evidence presented, the court finds that Dr. Nosi has been unfairly burdened financially, while the defendant benefited from the property. Matthew's face turned pale. The judge continued. The court orders the following. The entire room went silent. Mr. Matthew must either repay Dr. Nosi the full value of the loan payments she has made, or the property will be placed under judicial sale. Matthew's jaw dropped. Nels grabbed his arm. What does that mean? She whispered. He didn't answer. The judge finished speaking. If the defendant fails to repay the amount within 90 days, the house will be sold and the proceeds used to settle the loan and compensate Dr. Nosi. The gavel struck the desk. Court adjourned. Matthew tried everything. He tried to negotiate. He tried to borrow money. But the amount was simply too large. Within 3 months, the court ordered the property to be sold. The same beautiful house that once symbolized Nosi's dreams was now being auctioned. Matthew and Nels had no choice but to move out. On the day they left, a moving truck stood outside the house. Nels looked furious. This is all your fault, she snapped at Matthew. My fault? He shouted back. You're the one who said she wouldn't fight. They argued loudly while workers carried furniture into the truck. Neither of them noticed a car parked down the road. Inside the car sat Nosi. She watched quietly. Not with anger, not with hatred, but with calm closure. The house was eventually sold. The loan was settled. And Nosi received the remaining balance, enough money to start again. 6 months later, Nosi stood on another piece of land. This one was smaller, but it was hers, completely hers. No lies, no betrayal, no manipulation, just a fresh start. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from the construction company. Building can begin next week. Nosi smiled softly. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel painful. It felt hopeful. She looked at the land and whispered quietly to herself, This time, I build for me. And somewhere in the distance, the sun slowly began to rise over the horizon. A brand new chapter of her life was just beginning. Sometimes the greatest betrayal comes from the person you trusted the most. Nosi gave Matthew her love, her trust, and even the house they were supposed to share. But when he chose deception over loyalty, he forgot one important thing. Truth always finds its way to the surface, and in the end, the very house he stole from her became the reason he lost everything. Because when you build your happiness on someone else's sacrifice, that foundation will eventually collapse. If this story touched you, remember this. Never sign away your future for someone who has not proven they deserve it. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply rebuilding your life without the people who tried to destroy it.